The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. Hope everyone is doing awesome today. Before we get started with the actual webinar, so this is just a quick sound check. So if you could hear me loud and clear, please go ahead and then raise your hands in the GoToWebinar chat box. Literally I meant in the GoToWebinar chat box. So that if you're looking for the GoToWebinar chat box, that would look something like what you would see on the screen right now. You can say it is on the extreme right hand side of your screen. So go ahead and then say yes in the GoToWebinar chat box, or raise your hands in the GoToWebinar chat box so that if you could hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Daniel. Hi, Daniel, how are you? This is Zambi. Thank you, Drapen. Thank you, Frank. Perfect. So looks like everybody can hear me loud and clear. And then okay, perfect. We just still have about like 60 seconds before we go live on this one. So this is a quick sound check, making sure everything is up and running. So can you also make sure that can you also make sure that if you could see me see my screen clearly. If you could see my screen clearly, just say you could see my screen. You could see my screen, or just raise your hands if you could see my screen. You would see a slide that says what is next. So I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me clearly, and then also make sure that everybody can see my screen. So if you could see my screen, just say yes, I can see a screen. Hi, Leonard. Okay, so people are just trickling in, and then so we need to give them a couple of more seconds, and then we get started. So probably we'll give them another 30 seconds. So hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, Vanessa, thank you so much. Leonard, thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be a really amazing webinar today. Okay, so I just want to quickly go ahead and then introduce the panel for the day. So of course, the voice that you're hearing right now, it's me, Ambi Murthy, and then I'm pretty sure that everybody on the call has kind of like interacted with me, probably in person, probably over email. I work as the partner. So I head the partner acquisition efforts at Zoho around the globe. And then today, I do have a panel with me. So today's panel has a main speaker, which is Chakrapani, and then so he is from the Zoho CRM user education team, and then he has an interesting background of working with multiple companies, and then now he's with Zoho. So such a pleasure to have you on call today. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you, MB.
Okay, perfect. So the other panelist on call today is Raghuram, and then he's one of the engineers who works in the CRM API team itself, especially the REST API team. He is pumped, and then he's pumped in a way. If you watch the hit show on HBO Silicon Valley, Jared would say, "Your pumpness makes me pumped," and then he's pumped that way today. So hi, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. So I'm just looking forward for a great presentation today.
Okay, so you're going to be a part of the presentation, so you better give a good presentation today. Okay. Okay. So enough of the small talk, and then so let's get started with the actual webinar, and then we are ready to roll. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay, so we're going to start off today's webinar, and before that, I'm going to ask you to do a very small favor to me, which is the hashtag Zoho Inspire on Twitter. So what is Zoho Inspire? So Zoho Inspire is an exclusive event that we conduct only for partners. So this webinar, this year-long webinar series, product training, as well as the other best practices training on sales and marketing, is an year-long webinar series that we are doing only for partners. partners. This is a partner exclusive initiative, and only our top partners get invited to this thing. So go ahead and then help us spread the word about this thing by using the hashtag Zoho Inspire on Twitter, and then tweet out any interesting quotes or any interesting tidbits that you get out of this webinar. And then so that is, and the most cool webinar, most cool tweet will win interesting Zoho goodies like a t-shirt, cap, or any Zoho swag from Zoho, and then we'll personally hand it over to you at Zohoholics or even ship it to your location. So the hashtag is hashtag Zoho Inspire. Use it wisely on Twitter. Now, coming to the main event of the day, which is basically the title, which today is about REST API integration. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, Chakrapani, who is from our CRM user education team, is going to be presenting it, and then he's assisted by Sriram as well as Balaram from the Zoho CRM engineering team. So, what is so different about this panel is that you folks have this really amazing opportunity today to go ahead and then talk to the actual developers who have, so the devs who actually develop these REST APIs are on call with us today. So folks, do not let go of this golden opportunity. I tell you this as a Zoho insider person. Okay, so anything, if you want to go ahead and ask the tough questions, if you want to roast them, go ahead and roast them. And then even if you have any interesting feedback about the APIs which they have been developing. So these are the guys who are going ahead and then making the ingredients of the API. So you have the speaker from the user education team, and then you have the engineers who are leading these efforts. Okay, so this is the real deal. So the next 60 minutes, buckle yourself up for an amazing ride. Now, enough of the title, and then so I want to talk about the Zoho CRM for developers, which has been a huge initiative push from Zoho. So previously, Zoho CRM was very user-friendly and all that stuff, but of course we looked into how we can extend the capabilities of the CRM. That's why we bought the Zoho developer program, and then one of the offshoots is what I would call the Zoho marketplace, which is also an amazing place where developers go and then build amazing apps, and then you should check out a bunch of apps over there. So real integrations, really good, cool use cases. So that is the Zoho CRM for developers, and this REST APIs are a huge part of how developers leverage this network. Okay, so go ahead and then use these REST APIs and then unlock amazing potential out of your integrations. Now, before I hand over the floor to Chakrapani, I just want to give you a little bit of a housekeeping notes in here. So first we want to talk a little bit about why does an API exist in the first place, and then we're going to talk about the real deal, what's new, and then how we're going to do a bunch of demos and all that, where you should pay utmost attention in terms of some cool scenarios, a lot of demos, and then we're also going to talk about API limitations that we have on each API that we're putting out for integrations. And the most interesting part is we're going to give you real-time examples, like actual demos, and then brace yourself. Some of them might not work in real time, so cut us some slack for that. So we'll do our best to make it work, and I'm pretty sure that 99% of the time it's going to work. So, and I just want to go ahead and then say that. So watch out for the hashtag Zoho Inspire on each slide. So that is the hashtag that you should be tweeting out interesting quotes from the speaker or from the Q&A. Now, before I go ahead and then give it to the main speaker, I do have a really interesting announcement to make. So that is about the whole Q&A session. Okay, so this whole Q&A session, one thing that you have to be very interesting about this is, since we have the actual devs of this is a live webinar, by the way. Okay, so go ahead and then ask your questions as and when you see an interesting thing coming up on the screen. And it can also be something that you have been discussing about REST APIs in general with your team and all that stuff. Okay, so go ahead and then use it really well. Keep your Q&A coming right throughout the session. We do have the devs ready on chat, so put your questions in the GoToWebinar chat box, and then they will be answering in the chat. And towards the end of the session, we have 10 minutes for Q&A also. But go ahead and then use maximum time, ask away any single question that you might have in the GoToWebinar chat box, the chat box in the extreme right-hand side of your laptop or computer screen, and then ask your questions from there. Over to you. So all the best.
Okay, well begun is half done. Thank you for the great start, MB. I'll be taking over right now, and Before moving on to what's new with the API, I mean, the changes that we have made from the existing API to the newer version, let me just go over what actually an API is, which most of you guys might already know, but still, let me just do it once again. So, for instance, an API is something which is like a bridge which connects two applications with each other and allows them to share data between them and use each other's functionalities as well. For instance, let me just give you a simple example. Uh, Say you type out a document in Notepad or Writer or MS Word or anything for that matter, and you need to print that document on a paper. So the writing software, Notepad or MS Word, is completely different from the printing software. But through the use of an API, there is an option available in Notepad which is usually called print. So once you click that button, the data from Notepad is sent to the printing software, where the printing software sends that data to the printer, and you get your printout. So that is possible only through APIs, and that's one of the most simplest form of an API. And the functionality extends as applications are developed. Okay, so moving on to what we had in the previous version of our APIs, the method of authentication, I mean, the security measures that we've provided is auth token, while the newer version is O Auth 2.0. So I'll be listing out the advantages of O Auth 2.0 in the forthcoming slides. And the other thing is the number of API calls, I mean, the methods of API calls that you can make is quite limited. For instance, at the bottom of the screen, you might see some API calls that can be made using the previous version, and it doesn't have options for performing actions such as there's a new API for handling tags, handling layouts, handling custom views, or a particular single layout. So those APIs are not available in the previous version, and that is one big advantage over adopting the version 2 over the version 1. So what's really new in that new API is let me just give you a quick comparison about what is available in version 2 was what is not in version 1. For instance, in version 1 there is get records and get record by ID, but in version 2 there's a lot more APIs, and not just get record. It also gives you options to insert single records, update single records, or combine both of them, insert and update, and that turns into upsert APIs. And furthermore, we also have linking modules API, which is for the later part. I'll be explaining it later. And another main thing is in the previous version, yeah, there is an API which is get users, but it only gives you the current users that are in your Zoho CRM. But in the newer version of the API, it has the users API, it has organization API, roles, and profiles API. So all of the important things that you might keep in your Zoho CRM, the number of users, your organization details, the roles and profiles that you have created, you can view and access them all using this new API. And the other big feature would be the tag APIs because tags is a feature which is commonly used everywhere to categorize most of the information according to your requirement. So if what if we had an API to control tags? So it's like there might be a few records which are grouped under a single tag, and if you want to make changes to those records, um, you might have to do it individually before, but now since they are grouped into a single tag, you just use one API call to uh, you know manipulate data for all of those related records. And the metadata APIs, this is quite important, and that's why I've given a entirely new slide for it. As As in the version 1, there are only two metadatas, get fields and get modules, and the functionality is quite limited there. So the difference is there are quite a few layouts in Zoho CRM, which you guys might have been using it because layouts is something which uh, takes CRM to the next level. So we are giving you options to view what are the layout changes that you have made in Zoho CRM, and not just stopping there. We are also giving you the API to view the related lists, the custom views, and of course, if you have multiple custom views, you can also view a single one at a time. Okay, so
okay. I'm just going to stop you there for a quick minute. Okay, so thank you so much for really put out in a very cool way what's the difference in the current version and the upcoming version. Okay, so I'm going to play the devil's advocate a little bit here right now, and then ask the question which every partner on call today wants to ask you. So when is all this coming out?
It's going to be released this February.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So this is a good heads up.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead. Keep going. Okay.
Okay. Now back to the topic. Now, what do you guys see on the screen? Those three options. These three might be, not might be. These three are the other three major changes that have been utilized in the version 2, or 2.0 authentication, and the request methods, and the format of the responses. So, OAuth 2.0, it's a major change in how security is provided to you. Security for using those APIs. And since their security is upgraded, you have complete access to who can access who can use the APIs for your application, because you have to register your client application with Zoho, and in that registration, there would be options to control who can access your data. Who can access your APIs as well. And as for accessing the data, limiting the data access, that falls under the third option. The scopes one. Scopes is a form of, it's a measure of providing access to data access. For instance, in any Windows, there is an option which says read only, and there's a checkbox to it. And not only that, there is also options like read, write, delete, and etc. So on an API, since it's just going to be an URL, you enter the URL and hit enter, and you'd be getting the output. How do you actually restrict the access to read only or write only or something like that? Those are possible only through scopes. So with scopes, you can set information about a record to be only read only, so no one gets to manipulate any data and just view them or something like that. And as for the last one, the multi-GC handling, it's something, it's the domain of your API. For instance, after you registered your application with Zoho, you'd be giving a redirect URL there, and that redirect URL, with the consent of the user, when you're actually getting the grant token, in the response you would be getting an API domain which would contain the domain name there. So, and that domain name might differ, and that DZ might differ. Currently, we have three domains: one for the US, Europe, and China, which would be .com, .eu, and .cn. Okay, and before making an API call, what is the most important that begs your attention? The first one would be the API names, because for each resource that is available in Zoho CRM, there is a particular name. For instance, the leads module is just actually leads. And for sales orders, the actual API name that you should be using in the request URL should be sales underscore orders. So if you miss the underscore, the API won't get executed and it would throw up an error. So, and in the newer version, in the newer version of API for custom modules, it's just the module name. And similarly, if there are two names for the module, you would need to add an underscore in between. If you guys have some doubts as to if, for instance, you're using the correct API name, you can always use a metadata module metadata API, and in that response, it would show the correct API name. So as to how you use the module metadata API, I'll be showing you in the demo after a while. Okay, moving on to scopes. Like I said before, scopes is, it controls the level of data access a user has. So as you see on the screen, the ones in the bowl, scope equals Zoho CRM modules.leads.all. That is a scope which gives a user control over all of the records in the leads module. So, for instance, if you need access to records in all the modules and not just the leads module, just remove the leads from that. So the scope becomes scope equals Zoho CRM.modules.all, and you have data access to all of the records in all modules. And at the end of the scope, which says the .all, that is also quite important, because if you change that to read, create, update, or delete, you can restrict data access based on the operation type. For instance, if you just give read, the user would have only read access. So if you give create, he would only be able to insert new records but not view or make changes to existing records, and so on it goes.
So before we keep moving further into the webinar, I just want to quickly chime in and then say, so we do have plenty of developers on, partners who are developers or tech partners on call today. So partners, I just want to give you a very gentle reminder. So we do have a panel of developers from the API team. So any questions related to the current projects they're working on the API, as well as any questions about the presentation. So with the panelists ready to take questions in the GoToWebinar chat box, so keep them coming. Okay? Okay, back to you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And moving on, the other most important thing would be the domain. So initially, when you're registering your application with Zoho, you would be given a client ID, and you would be asked to give the redirect URL. And the thing to note here is, if you're going to give a redirect URL, it means that you have your own server and you have your own website of sorts. So if there is a situation where you don't need to give a redirect URL and you need to uh, use APIs without a server, there is also an option in the developer console, which just a moment, I'll show you. Okay, so here I've already added a client application, so it shows up as one, and the steps are quite same. Where initially, when you're adding a client, the following screen is what you would be seeing. So this client ID and client secret would initially not be available, and you would be asked to give a name, domain, and a redirect URL. And in the update client would be add client, and once you've added the client, you would get your client ID and client secret. And to proceed further, and like what I said before, if you do not have a redirect URL and you would need to call APIs without a server, there is an option here called self client. So you can just click the self client here, which would ask you for the scope, and I have already entered some scopes here. So select the scopes and hit view code, and you would get your grant token. Right, and there you have it. So this would be a grant token which would allow you to get the access and refresh tokens. And all right, I'm sorry, I forgot. What are access and refresh tokens? So an access token is something which lets you actually make the API call. Like I said before, it's a form of a security measure. And if you do not have an access token, you would not be able to make the API call. And in order to get the access token, you need this grant token here, which authorizes a user. The grant token is a form of an providing a sort of key to a user stating that he can get an access or a refresh token. So once we got our access a grant token here, okay, and that concludes the domain part and actually making the API call. So the most important thing here is API calls are usually through request URLs, where if for instance you have you need to input some data into a CRM, you can actually enter the data here, like you can enter the data as an input, and once you run the correct HTTP method called post, it would it would input the data that you have provided into CRM. So, and there comes the method ones, the HTTP methods. Those are quite simple. Compared with the previous versions, the HTTP methods currently supported are get, post, put, patch, and delete. Get fetches the data. Post inputs data into a CRM. Put and patch updates data which is already existing in your CRM, and delete is pretty much self-explanatory. And as for the resources, like I said before, the API names, a resource is like, a component of CRM which is possible to be modified using an API. For instance, the module name here, and a sub resource is something which exists within the resource. For instance, when you're opening up a record in the leads module, there would at the URL there would be a section which says ID equals and then a few numbers. So that would be the sub resource, while the module name would be the actual resource. Okay, apart from the conventional HTTP methods, there are a few actions which cannot be performed using those methods. For instance, lead conversion when a lead qualifies into a contact, executing some macros which you've already set in your CRM, and those actions cannot be performed using the normal HTTP methods, and that's the reason why we have added a new actions. You have given provisions to perform those actions using APIs. And as you see there in the URL specified that this is actually a request URL where the Zoho APIs.com would be the domain. Leads here would be the API name of the module. Record ID would be the sub resource that I said before, the ID of a record in a lead, and actions after that would be the actual action. And since it's convert after that, the API denotes that the the record that we have specified in the record ID has to be converted to a contact. Okay, moving on to the responses and some of the errors that you might get. Okay, in the previous version of the APIs, the responses would be in XML format, which takes a bit of time to for parsing, and that it would be overcome in the newer version of the API, where the response format is in JSON. I'm sorry, the JSON format. So the difference between that previous and newer version is that the input format that you give in order to input data into CRM would be exactly the same as the output that you would get when you fetch data from the CRM. Um, Let me just give you an example. Let's say you use the get method to fetch information about a lead from CRM, and you need to update once a single field for that lead. Let's say you update his fax number, which previously you didn't have, and after you've contacted him, you got his fax number, and you need to update it using APIs. For you can use the get method to get information about that lead in your in Postman, which I use for my convenience. And you can take the response that you get there and give them as input for the put method, and you can just change the fax number, which would it would be null there because there was no number before. And once you input the number, you can just send the API, and when you go over to your CRM, the field will be changed. And the other major issue that the JSON format overcomes over the XML would be the JSON array and JSON object problem. For instance, when you use the get records API from previous version of the previous version of API, the output would be as a JSON array. And if you use a get records by ID method, the output would be in JSON object. And when you run those two together and parse them, it would throw up an error where you cannot proceed further, and you would need to do it individually again. And that issue is overcome in JSON format, and those sort of issues would not be you would not be able to see them in this newer version of the API. And these are a few status codes that you might get when you're um, executing APIs. And yeah, we'll be giving it in detail in our webpage. Okay, moving on to some of the limitations of this newer version of the API. Of course, obviously, there are going to be some. This is not actually a limitation, it's a form of an advantage. The first one, the rolling window period of 24 hours. Since there is a refresh time after 24 hours, it lets you keep track of the API calls, the number of API calls that you make in a day, the number of API calls each user makes in a day. So it provides you a bit of a little bit more of control over your what is it, API calls. And the other one, I'm just giving this an example. In the enterprise edition, um, say you have like what I've given there, say you have 10 users, the minimum number of API calls that you can make in a day for each user would be 1,000 requests per day. So if you have 10 users, it's going to be 10,000 requests per day. As for the maximum, the upper limit, it would be 100,000 requests per day per organization, not per user. And as okay, the throttling, there is some limitations there as well. For each client application registered with Zoho, only 100 calls can be made by a single user within a minute. So if you need to make more, just wait for a minute. Okay, so let me just give you some examples in the form of a demo. The first one would be the organization API, which would give you, which fetches information about your organization from your CRM, and it displays in the form of a JSON object. And I have already run one here. The organization API. Let me just make the API call once again. Okay, the interesting thing here, okay, it came up, sorry about that. So as you can see here, there are a few fields which says null because I haven't updated them, pardon my negligence, and the employee count is 1, which is me. That's quite pathetic, but yeah, you get the point. So the point is, all of the information about your organization is given in the form of given within this JSON object here. So since it's the organization, it can be only one per CRM. It's just a JSON object and not a JSON array here. Okay, users API. I'm sorry about that. As for the users API, it allows you to fetch information about all of the users that are currently in your organization. Okay, let me just run the users API for you. I've sent the API call. Please bear with me. Okay. Okay, as you see here, there's a lot more information compared to the just the organization. And since there are two users here currently in my Zoho account, you can see this is one JSON object and this is another one. Since it is in a JSON array, it's separated by this comma here. That's the only difference between the JSON object and JSON array, which was not possible in the previous version of the APIs. And furthermore, all of the information about a particular user, when they were created, when they were modified, if they have any websites of their own, or uh, if they have performed any activities, you can see them all here. Yeah, like the status here, she's an active user here, and those are possible using the users API. And moving on to metadata APIs, metadatas are quite um, it adds a bit more functionality to normal API usage in the way that, okay, I'll open up the metadata API here, and let me just change the module name to leads, and make the API call, and I got information about what are all the fields that are available inside a module. For instance, um, this module, since the request URL is for leads, it shows all of the fields that are available in leads, all of the mandatory fields, and quite a few properties of that field, if it is converted or approved, and how many leads can be displayed per page. I've set it to 40, and so on. So you get to know about the entire module, the information about the entire module without the records. It shows information about the module, not the information in the record. That would be a metadata API, and not just a module. You can also view the. There is also an API for the fields which are available in a module. For instance, let me just hit leads again, and I make the API call. And as you see in the URL, it says fields question mark module equals leads, and that means in the modules in the leads module, what resource that you're going to search, that would be fields. So I run this field API, metadata API, and I get information about what are all the fields that are available in the module, uh, in the leads module. For instance, if we have uh, made some changes to the layout and added quite a few custom fields, or removed some of the existing fields or something like that, this metadata API shows you information about all of those. And the other metadata APIs would be layouts, which will show you all of the layouts that you have created for your Zoho CRM. In the same way, the only difference between the previous and this one would be this word here in the URL has been changed from fields to layouts. So, and as you see in the response here, right, so as you see in the response here, it shows you all of the changes to the layouts that you have made. For instance, let's say this one shows lead source type a string. So Since this JSON object is here, it means that this layout contains a field called lead source. So, and it goes by that. And the other metadata APIs would be custom views and related lists, which work in the same way as this one. And moving on to the one of the major APIs, one of the most commonly used APIs, which would be the record APIs. Obviously, yeah, you'd be the point of APIs is to manipulate data in a CRM, which would be in the form of a record. So, as you can see here, let me just show you here. Okay, so there's an option to fetch records, which is the get method, insert records into CRM, which is post, put, which updates existing information in a record, and delete, which obviously deletes them. And we've categorized them into single and bulk options, so you can choose to um, play around with multiple records at the same time, or play around with the single one. Okay, let me just run a new API for the records. I set the module name to leads, and I make the API call, and please bear with me. Okay, there you go. Okay, now there are multiple JSON objects which shows you information about each lead that you have in your Zoho CRM. For instance, you see here in the full name and another one, right? So if there is a requirement that you need information about a single particular lead and not all of the records in the leads module, the only difference that you need to make in this would be this ID here that I'm selecting right now. This ID is the sub resource of this particular record, and you go over to the URL, hit slash, enter the ID, and make the API call once again. And as you see, sorry about that. Okay, as you see here, there is only a JSON object and not an array, and this JSON object shows you information only about that particular lead. And that's how you separate single operations from bulk operations with records. And in the same way, the other methods listed here, get, post, put, patch, and delete, can be, the request URL is the same, but changing the methods, you'll be able to perform different APIs using this, the version 2. And now, the related list APIs. Another interesting feature of Zoho CRM would be the option for related list. And I mean, I'm making an assumption that a single record in the module in CRM is related to at least 4 or 5 other modules. I'm sorry, records in other modules. For instance, let's say you have a lead, you convert them into a contact, and that contact is associated with the deal, and you pull over to a deal and you make a sales order, a purchase order, and yeah, and quite a few. So since they are all associated, and you need to know the information about a particular contact and the deals or sales orders about that contact, it would be a waste of time to, you know, uh, search for each record in the different modules, and you can use a single API call to pull up information about all of the related records to a particular contact, and that would be the related list APIs. And apart from that, the linking modules API. So the name might be new to you guys, when the previously you might be knowing it as MXN database relationship. Commonly it is known as many-to-many relationships. It's like multiple records can be associated with each other using this and the linking modules. Let me just give you uh, an example as to how the linking module works. It's not an example; it's just like a comparison, so you'll be able to better understand what linking modules is. Let's say, for instance, you create a custom module with any name for that sake, and you have a record A in one module, a record B in another, and in that custom module that you have created, you edit the layout of that custom module and have two lookup fields, which allows you to select record A from one module and record B from another module. So you don't have to go over to the first module to view one piece of information and go over to the second module to the other. And you can just straight over click select the custom module to view information about both of them, since you can select both of them. And that's how the linking modules work as well. But the only difference is the linking module would not be usually visible to you, and there is an option to make it visible if you wish so. Okay, so that's how the API calls usually work, and we're just giving you a few recommendations of when you are using your APIs, which some of them are you can cache in metadata regularly, and which would allow you to, perform API calls faster. Synchronize your data based on the last modified time. This one you would be able to see here in uh, in the response of an API, the one that I'm highlighting it right now, which says last activity time. It shows you the date, time, uh, date and time in which a record was last worked on. So by using this field here, this entire name here, and using this as an input, you'd be able to, make changes to some records based on a particular time instead of searching for it one by one and manually keeping note of, keeping track of time. The other and the other one would be to use bulk APIs for insert and update, because it can be quite time consuming to update each record over. Let's say you need to insert about 50 records in a day, and each of them have an interval of 5 to 10 minutes in between. So you can just save them later and use a single API call to input all of them instead of making an API call every 5 minutes. And the other one would be use only the required scopes. Like I said before, scopes are a sort of a security measure which allows you to restrict data access to a particular user. While it might be, you might be tempted to give the entire data access to everyone, it would be advisable to use limited scopes and uh, give what the owner the only I mean give the user only what he wants. Okay, and what we have on our timeline with what is going to come up in the future would be these three: notification, search, and bulk APIs. As for the notification API, it allows you to program your APIs to send you instant updates whenever a change is made to a record in in Zoho CRM. So, for instance, let's say you have quite a few employees here with you, and you need to know when they you need to know the time in which they work on a record. So if you use this notification API, you would be able to instantly know whenever a change happens to a record. And as for the search API, with multiple operators, and by multiple operators I mean uh, there are you can search by using criteria, or you can search by using a single word. There is a global criteria search in normally available when you're using filters in Zoho CRM. That is in the UI, in the actual CRM and not the APIs. So we're giving out that functionality as an API as well. So um, if you want to search based on a single name that you've given in a in within a field, you can search for records which have the similar information. This might be a bit useful than randomly searching for. And as for the bulk APIs, uh, as of now, there is a limit of 200 records which you can currently work on, and in the future updates, we would be increasing that limit to about 2 lakh. I'm sorry, in 200,000 records within a single API call. It's like bundling them into a single input, and you can make you can make modifications to the CRM data at one go for a maximum of 200,000 records.
Okay.
Yeah, and there we go.
So I think thank you so much. It's a really interesting roundup of all the existing APIs as well as the upcoming features. I'm really excited that towards the end of the presentation that you also showed what's coming up in the timeline, right? So one of the common questions our partners have is that, okay, so what is the next big thing that we would want to know? And right now, we are not only putting this out for you, this single feature in REST APIs, but we go ahead and then give it to every single feature, every single webinar that's coming up. So I'm pretty sure that everybody knows about this Zoho Inspire thing. Product webinars as well as thought leadership webinars, best in class practices, and all that. So we keep you notified about all the things coming up, and then you can always go back to the partner portal and check for information. So before it's start of the Q&A session. Okay. So before we start the Q&A session, I quickly want to go ahead and then launch a poll. So the poll is something that's very simple and straightforward. So this poll is, can you please go ahead and then rate this webinar on the overall quality of delivery of the webinar based on content and delivery. So 1 is the lowest and then 5 is the highest. On a scale of 5, I would say 5 would be excellent, 4 would be good, 3 would be average, 2 would be bad, and then 1 would be very, very bad. Okay, so this is just the feedback that we want to get from you. Select any number of your choice and then go ahead and then vote for us. So 5 is the highest rating that you can give, and 1 is the lowest rating that you can give. So you could see that we really, really put a lot of effort into getting in the right speakers, getting the right people, and not only that, we also bring in the best-in-class people who can answer questions of the features who are, since they design it by themselves. At the end of the day, they are here to defend those features and then see how you are pushing the limits on these features. So please go ahead and then rate this session because it's very crucial for us. We have a year-long commitment. We are going to do webinars for the next 10 months, probably not in December, but we do. So we would really, really love to know from you. Just go ahead and then just click on whatever would be your blunt feedback about this whole session. So keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and then it will really, really help us to improve in the upcoming webinars. And then even if you have any specific question, any specific or feedback in the comment section, please go ahead and put that up. So I think I'm going to give you just 5 more seconds for you to go ahead and then just click on any number and then click on the submit button. So 5 is the highest and 1 is the lowest. So I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Boom. Okay. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Share the results, and then there you go. Okay. Thank you so much to everyone who voted. And then looks like this is an instant winner. So thank you. So what I'm going to quickly do is that. Okay. So I think let's get started with the Q&A right now. So okay. So with the Q&A. Okay. So with the questions, so let's look into the most. Okay. Okay. So okay. Okay, so Albert has asked this question. Is there an option to get the attachment? So this question I'm going to pass it on to the developer.
Yeah, so hello guys, I'm Raghuram from Zoho CRM API development team. So I'm glad to answer your questions here. So the question is there an option to get the attachments? So yeah, you will be able to get the attachments. So if you refer the help doc, there will be a section like files and attachments. In that one, there will be a first section, get list of attachments. If you just click on that, you will get the what is the URL pattern and everything. So you can just follow that API and then you'll be able to get the attachments at the time itself. So no problem.
Okay. Next question. That is again from. Okay, so is there a Zoho CRM API collection available for download? That's the real deal. So people want to know: is there like a single database where you have most of the V1 version of the APIs?
So many questions which people ask us like where we can try all those APIs which you guys have claimed in the help doc. So what we have done is that we have created a Postman collection. So it is available to download from our version to help doc. You can get it. You can try it on your own. You can change the params, change the URL, try out everything. So that Postman client is just to analyze how Zoho CRM works. It's not for development. It's just to understand the Zoho CRM APIs. So still there are many other REST clients, but since we are comfortable with the Postman, we are using this. But if you're comfortable with any other clients, you can very well use those.
Okay. Okay, so Venice has asked this really nice question. Where is the best place to go to learn how to set up APIs? Is there a help document for that where you can go to learn how to set up these APIs and all that?
Yeah, so it's just a help link of those are our version to APIs. You can just simply go to our help doc, browse around those articles. You'll find link of all our APIs. So anyway, we will give you the link of those help doc link. You can find it in your webinar email.
And also, we're also sending it again to everybody who's on call. So hopefully you have received the link. Okay, Jeffrey has got this really interesting question. The huge keeps coming up every time we talk about APIs. Are these new API methods available in Deluge? Fields is equal to Zoho CRM, fields is equal to get fields is equal to leads.
Yeah, so currently it's not available. So as we are approaching further, currently we are developing in a way that it can be used in Deluge also. So in upcoming future, integrating with O Auth 2, you will find a way to call those APIs in Deluge itself. So it won't be a much problem as you might be facing now. So maybe in 2 to 3 weeks it might not be a problem for you guys. So very well you can use it in Deluge.
Okay, perfect. So what is the next question? Okay, so Albert has asked this really interesting question. Okay, are you going to post your name? So are you asking about the names of the presenters? Okay, so so the person who spoke for a very so the voice that you're hearing right now, my name is Ambi, AMBI. I'm the person who was the main presenter for the day. That's the tough riddle for you. So his name is Chakrapani. And then the person who's the dev who's answering that question is Raghuram. So he's going to type out all the three names out for you right now. Okay. So I think that's pretty much done. Okay. So I hope you got the names. I'm not sure what you're going to do with them. Okay. So Albert has asked this question. I would like to share the webinar with co-workers. Can you please send? Yeah, sure. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and then everybody will get a copy of this along with the presentation. There's another interesting question about notification APIs. Will the response include the kind of action that was performed on the record, like update field X in record 1? Or what level of detail do you plan to provide? We need a way to do an audit of user activity. This functionality would be great. Thanks.
So for the first cut of notifications API, so what we have planned is that for one OAuth app, you can make an API call to register notification. So one notification will be binded to one channel. So that channel can include many modules, say leads, accounts, contacts, deals. So whenever there's a change happening in those modules, you will get a webhook API call. In that request body, you will get data like what module got affected, what are the record IDs, those kind of things. So currently it's not available for any user related changes or org related changes. It's available only for model related changes. So maybe in future we can go ahead for users, but for the first that you will be getting only for those modules.
Okay, so hope that answers your question. Please go ahead and then let us know if that was the answer that was really that was the one that you're looking for. So Lakshmanan has got this question. Can you repeat the new request limit and when those API limits will be coming into effect?
Yeah, so in version 2, the limiting concept is a bit different. So it's like for each version, sorry, each edition of Zoho CRM, there will be a base limit that will be incremented by number of users in the CRM account into number of API calls allocated for each person. Say if you are in enterprise edition, the basic limit for your org is 10,000, and then say you have 12 users purchased, and each users will have a limit of 1,000, so it makes 12,000. So as a total, you'll get something around 22,000 API calls in a rolling window of 24 hours. So it's not like starting up one day to ending up one day. It's like it'll be calculated for each and every 24 hours in the rolling window. So coming to the live, so it's like it's already live, so you can make use of it. The thing is that we will not stop old APIs for now, so you can very well use those, but we recommend you to use version 2 set of APIs now itself. So that should not make any problem.
So that's another interesting question by Caesar. So Caesar asks, will the same APIs will be implemented into other Zoho apps? So I'm pretty sure that most of the partners on call today do the majority on the CRM side. So what is happening on desk and other creator and all those apps?
So the main change you guys might have noticed is that O Auth to way of authentication, and then REST method standards, and then a rolling window of rate limiting. So these are first handled in our team. So still other teams are looking into changing it. You might expect those kind of changes in future, but we may not guarantee that time. But still, you can still expect those.
Okay, Albert demands an answer right now. So what is the use of upload a photo? Upload a photo for the modules different to contacts or accounts. So we do have a follow-up question, Albert, and then you need to answer it. Is it the image of a person or a company? So depending upon it, we might be able to tell you if it is possible or not. You still need to answer the follow-up question, and then we'll go ahead and then answer it for you. So Debanjan has asked this question. Can you please share the API documentation limitation for V2 APIs? So there you go. So we're quickly looking it up and then sharing it to you, and then we're sending it to everyone. It should be over there. Yes. Okay. So, we do have an entire team of huge Zoho partners coming. Okay, so this is from the KDG team. Will the change to the custom module API references be carried over to Deluge? Also, will existing Deluge scripts be broken by the switch if they are not updated to the new label? That's a really interesting question. So partners do a lot of implementations and they want to know how good it is going to be for their existing integrations. So do those old APIs still work?
Yeah, so when you start using version 2 set of APIs, your existing daily script will not get broken. So we are still offering backward compatibility that will be still working. So we are looking into probable sunset period. So till then we'll be working. We are working on a way for smooth migration from old set of API to our new set of APIs. So till then we'll be working. So no problem with that.
Okay, perfect. So KDG team, so hope that makes you happy that yes, so we'll be kind of like grandfathering the previous version also. So I think it's almost 10 a.m. Pacific time right now. Okay, but at the same time, so if you would, so please wait. So you don't have, there's no hard stop right now. So we still have time. So there is, if you want to hang out and then ask more questions, feel free to. If you had a hard stop, please feel to exit. Okay, so Albert, looks like your question we might have to take it offline. So what regarding to the photos? So please go ahead and then send an email to support@zohocrm.com. Mention this that you are in this webinar, and then ask for Raghuram in particular, and then it will be forwarded to Raghuram, and then he'll go ahead and then answer this question. Okay, so I think we are pretty much done with most of the questions. So any other questions? And we do have a really, really interactive session. So any more questions for the team? So this is your really nice golden ticket chance to go ahead and then ask the devs about what they really, really think through. So Albert said, okay, so thanks. Okay. So other than that, any specific question about APIs. So we still have a bunch of partners who are sticking around and then hanging out with us to go ahead and then. Okay, so we're going to give you 60 more seconds and then we're going to call it a day with this webinar. So we're done. So I really want to thank the speaker, Chakrapani, and then Sriram and Raghuram who have come in today, Zoho Inspire, and then inspire our partners, and then hopefully we also drive a lot of adoption to features that we've been trialing and then working on for a really, really long
Yeah,
time.
so thank you, Mohammed, for the chance. So it's a great session so that we can educate our partners and other people. So when you are expecting these kind of webinars in future.
Thank you. So I think that's okay. Okay, perfect. So perfect. So please go ahead. So I think it's pretty much it. Thank you so much. And then so until next time, it's Ambi and team who are signing off. And then much love. So stay tuned, and then come back for more Zoho inspiration. Bye bye.